Welcome to Wednesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. Phone number 201-939-4513. You could also stay antisocial and hit us up on Twitter or social media, hashtag Giants Chat. As a reminder, you could join on tuning into the archive as well of the show, as our entire podcast network is on the Giants mobile app, podcast platforms everywhere, and at giants.com/podcast. He is Paul Dottino. I'm Lance Medow. Quoting Randy Quaid, "Boys and girls, I am back, and it's good to be." How are we doing, sir?
I am so glad to say this is not a repeat of an old show on the archive. This is indeed a new show. Let's see, January the 22nd, 2025. And by your appearance today, it now puts you one full step ahead of Jimmy Hoffa, who has yet to reappear.
Well, are you saying that I have superhuman powers, that I am able to
don't think there's any
navigate
doubt about
the
it.
swampland, you're saying, in East
Indeed.
Rutherford, New Jersey? Okay, we'll leave it at that. For you youngsters, you could read between the lines and maybe Google that at a later time. Paul would be more than happy to give you a history lesson moving forward here on the program. But it's good to see you.
You too, sir.
I should reintroduce myself. I'm Lance.
Hello,
Medow.
Lance.
Yeah, thank you so much. Pearson, it's good to see him, and look forward to interacting with our usual suspects as we move forward here for the next 60 minutes. So a lot that we want to delve into and cover over the course of this program. We've got some Giants news with respect to the coaching staff, Paul, so we'll get into that off the top. And then we had a busy weekend across the NFL landscape with respect to the divisional round. So Paul and I will provide some takeaways. Curious to hear your feedback as well. So let's start with the news of the day, and that's with respect to the Giants coaching staff. They had parted ways with Jerome Henderson, a longtime presence on the coaching staff, and now the new secondary coach and defensive passing game coordinator is going to be Marquand Manuel, who played in the NFL for 8 seasons, from 2002 to 2009 as a DB. He's been an assistant coach. He's been a defensive coordinator in the league going back to 2012, and we could get into some of the coaches that he's worked under, and the transition's not going to be much of anything because he's been with the Jets, Paul, for the last 4 seasons as their safeties coach, mainly under Robert Saleh. So now he comes over to a different part of New Jersey, same stadium, and really has the task of trying to help develop what still is a young secondary.
Well, I think the interesting part, and of course, every roster is different, so we don't want to say that automatically he will have the same success working with the Giants DBs as he did with the Jets. But in each of the last 3 seasons, the Jets were in the top 5 in terms of allowing fewest passing yards in the National Football League. That's a good sign. Prior to that, he was with the Eagles. We know what their secondary has been like for the most part. I think that year in 2020, it was
2020.
2020, they were middle of the pack.
Well, that was a down year for the whole division.
It was a down year
remember.
for them,
Yeah.
no doubt.
Yeah.
Prior to that, I think the thing that sticks out for me, not necessarily his couple of years or 3 years with the Falcons, but that he spent a number of years on the staff of the Seattle Seahawks. Now, we all know how Seattle over the last 15 years has usually had a very physical defense, a very effective defense, and of course, the legend of the Legion of Boom will always survive in Seattle. So,
and he was there with that group, too.
Yes. So, there's a lot about his background that would certainly be enticing.
No, I'm completely with you. And I think what's also attractive is, and you were hinting at this, the coaches that he's worked under. So, for example, you brought up Seattle. Okay, he was there with Pete Carroll. He was there with Dan Quinn. And then he went with Dan Quinn to Atlanta, where he started off as an assistant, then took over as the defensive coordinator.
And they didn't have a lot of bodies there.
No, they didn't. Well, the problem with Atlanta, in fairness to him, is they had no pass rush. So, Paul, you don't have anybody up front. I remember, you got to go still back. And not to get off topic here, but you've got to go back to the days of John Abraham in Atlanta, the last time they had a legitimate, consistent pass rusher. I know they acquired Matt Judon, but, even he had some mixed results this past season. So that tells you all you need to know. But he was with also a young secondary.
I thought you were going to go Claude Humphrey, by the way.
Well, I wasn't going to go that back far in time. I'll let you date yourself on this program. I don't go necessarily in terms of those archives. But your point is still well taken in terms of what I was hitting on. So Dan Quinn, as I mentioned, and then Doug Peterson in Philadelphia. We talked about the Jets. Also, look at the coaches he's been exposed to when he was a player. He was with Marvin Lewis in Cincinnati. He was with Mike Holmgren in Seattle. He was with Mike McCarthy in Green Bay. John Fox, former Giants defensive coordinator. He was with in Carolina. Mike Shanahan in Denver. So, once again, we're not saying that this means he's going to snap his fingers and do wonders. The point is, though, this is not his first rodeo, okay?
No.
He's been around the block a few times, and I think he's been exposed to also not just different coaches, but different schemes. And remember, he's now walking into Shane Bowen. He doesn't have history with Shane Bowen.
He does not.
So,
not that I know of.
No, well, I
don't think they know each other.
I didn't see them cross paths.
No, I don't see it. I don't think he's got any crossing paths with Dable either.
Correct. I did not see
anything.
that either. Well, you look at Dable wasn't in Seattle, and Dable wasn't in Atlanta, and Dable wasn't in Philadelphia.
No, I couldn't find
I didn't
anything.
see anything in terms of when he was a player. But the point is, how many times have we seen a DB coach, another assistant, you come in under a different umbrella, and now all of a sudden, the way you worked previously, you now have to teach some different fundamentals because of what the coordinator ahead of you is calling for within the parameters of what you're running.
Well, I think, the overall take from this is that he's got an awful lot of experience, a wide variety of experiences, and most importantly, probably some very positive results from those experiences. That gives him at least a step forward. When he comes here and he talks to the Giants and they decide that they're going to hire him, he's got a very accomplished resume. I don't know how many other people they may or may not have talked to. Let's make that clear. We don't know that. But it's hard to imagine that this guy's resume didn't impress as soon as he walked through the door. I think that's pretty clear. And as far as the Jets are concerned, they're in upheaval right now. They don't have a GM. They don't have a head coach. So any of the guys on their staff who may truly be worth something to keep, well, those guys are going to say a bird in the hand is worth more than two in the bush. They're going to go.
Yeah, why would you stay and run the risk that the new coach doesn't retain your services?
Exactly.
Makes no sense.
So it's not an indictment on him at all that he's getting away from the Jets. It's probably that he just saw an opportunity at a guaranteed deal. I'm taking it.
Yeah, absolutely. And once again, he doesn't have to uproot. I don't know his family situation.
I don't know either.
Pretty convenient. You're staying in the state, right? Mm-hmm. And you just maybe changing the parameters in your vehicle in terms of how you get to the facility. So from that standpoint, I would say it's a big win-win situation. The other thing that I think is important to note, and this is not necessarily the end-all be-all when it comes to assistants, Jerome Henderson, of course, played cornerback, but I think it helps, Paul, that you now also have a new positional coach that played in the secondary. I think there is a level of relation between the current players and listening to somebody that's been in those circumstances. I'm not saying it's a must, but I don't think it's a detriment. I don't think it hurts that now they're going from one guy that played the position to another guy as he assumes the same role.
Well, I think what I'm more curious about right now, and it's maybe the only question that I have this morning after Jeremy Fowler was the first one from ESPN to make the announcement. I think, and by the way, the Giants have not, I don't believe,
yes, they have not made it official as of yet.
So we want to be careful there.
It's all according to reports.
But I think the thing that I'm asking myself this morning is that the Giants have gone the last few years with a safeties coach with Trier and Henderson as the corners coach. The way this was presented by Jeremy Fowler of ESPN is that Manuel's going to be the defensive backs coach. So are they going from having two secondary coaches to having just one voice, which, it would be a change. I don't know. Are they going to maybe hire an assistant defensive backs coach to take some of that load off of Manuel's plate? Or are they just going to say, hey, you know what? This is your unit. Do what you need to do with it. Hey, folks, I know I'm dating myself again, but when I started out, you had like 6 assistants on the staff.
Yeah.
Now there's like 25.
Time has changed. Yeah.
Okay.
25. I mean, sometimes there's even more.
So who knows? I don't know what their plan is there.
It's a fair question, but I mean, he's got experience coaching an entire defense. So if they do want to have him shoulder the entire load of the secondary, I don't really think that's as big of a transition. And Henderson was also the passing game coordinator on the defensive side. So that he took on in addition to working with the corners. So there was a little bit more on his plate from that standpoint. And maybe part of the rationale, just to expand on what you're talking about, Paul, as to why maybe they're not going to split it is, they do look at previous years and they say, hey, maybe it's better this season we have one consistent voice. We have one guy talking to the safeties and the corners, especially if you're going to have some safeties that play in the slot and a corner that you use deep, depending on what Bowen decides to do as he tweaks the scheme entering year 2. And depending on that, they may say, hey, it's better to have one voice in the room as opposed to multiple voices. I'm sure if you're Brian Dable and you're Shane Bowen, It's not a matter of revamping everything. It's a matter of, okay, where was also the communication not ideal in 2024? And what I mean by communication, Paul, is I'm talking about what was not crystal clear to maybe our players during the week when we were implementing the game plan as it went from the defensive coordinator to the position groups. Because remember, in the NFL, you spend more time with your position coach than anybody else on the coaching staff. So, I mean, this is not one of those things, oh, we're just talking about it and we're going through the motion for the sake of going through the motion. Those corners and safeties, if it does work out that way, they're going to see a lot of Marquand Manuel. So that's number one. And then number two, the communication during the course of the game. When you're substituting personnel, Paul, who was the guy that made sure everybody was in? Was it the corners and the safeties on an island? Was it one guy doing that? I mean, those little nuances, I think, are clearly worthy of discussing over the course of the offseason.
Whatever the discussions were between Joe Shane and Brian Dable and John Mara going back a few weeks ago, it was quite clear. The number 2 priority on John Mara's list when he talked to the media was that I was tired of seeing offenses go up and down the field against our defense. So something was going to have to change. Whatever it was going to be, whether it was going to be players, which I'm sure there will be some player changes too, but there was not going to be status quo. Now, to be fair, just so that I'm clear on this, if you look at our stats from this past year, when I say our, I'm talking about the NFL, our stats. Giants actually did a really nice job against the pass. They were only 8th in passing yards allowed, 9th in terms of passing touchdowns allowed. So they were pretty high on both of those lists in the top third quotient. But it's because teams ran well.
That's what I was going to say. Game flow impacted that.
Game flow really did, and teams had leads on the Giants most of the time, and they were able to run the ball and control the narrative and milk the clock and basically bludgeon the Giants into I don't want to say into submission because the Giants fought hard, but they was often so far behind that there was nothing they could do. So the numbers are deceiving, but until the last game of the year, I bet you didn't know this one, the Giants did not give up a 100-yard receiver until the Eagles game, the last game of the season. You know, and I get it, right? There was some big plays that were mixed in throughout the course of the year. No one is denying that. A number of them were busted coverages, either mental mistakes by players or flat out physically busted coverage, where a guy slipped, a guy fell, guy didn't get to where he was supposed to be on time. There were a number of those, and they were littered throughout the course of the season. And that stuff can't happen. Not if you expect to win more games this year. That can't happen. You got to tighten that stuff down.
Well, I think game flow, once again, I would emphasize as a contributing factor to what you're talking about, because I think teams got to the point where they didn't need to force feed one guy in particular with respect to your stat about the 100-yarder, given the fact that if you're up comfortably in the second half, you're not really feeding, once again, the number one wide receiver. But the other thing that I think you were somewhat alluding to is the fact that secondary players are also critical in stopping the run. Let's not forget about that. And that, to me, is another element in play here for Marquand Manuel to come in. It's not just a matter of shoring up those big plays that you were talking about. Can you get the secondary to help take on the load up front in terms of alleviating the big boys from doing all the work?
Two of the Giants' rookies in the secondary, specifically Newman and Phillips, were very physical.
Especially because of the slot play.
And boy, did they love coming down to hit people.
But you want that to continue, I guess, is my point.
Absolutely. You certainly do. Now, the one interesting thing here, and somebody mentioned this to me earlier on my Twitter page this morning when the news came out, I had mentioned the fact that Coach Manuel had been on some successful secondary staffs with the Jets, and the one tweeter came back at me and said, oh, that's probably not good for Pinnock, because Pinnock was let go after his first year with the Jets, and then came to the Giants, and of course flourished and became a real NFL starter.
But they liked him, though, with the Jets.
Well, my thought was either A, you got to remember, the Jets had some depth in the secondary at that point.
That's exactly what I was
So
going to
he
get
was
at.
kind of caught in a numbers game.
Yeah.
B, he was a part-time bit player with the Jets as a rookie. So sometimes, as we all know, a young player needs to get in the lineup and prove what he can do, and he flourished. Jason Pinnock proved he's a competent NFL safety once he got the chance to play. So I would not hold any of that against him, but it's certainly interesting to note that, Pinnock did come from the Jets, and I would think that Manuel at least has some sense, even though he was only there the last 3 years, and that's when Pinnock was with the Giants. Pinnock had been with the Jets that spring and summer till he was then waived. So he
in 22, you're referring to.
Yeah, so he knows him a little bit.
Sure.
And Pinnock is an unrestricted free agent today. Let me just say that because he was on his rookie deal and he wasn't making a whole lot of money. And if nothing else, the last 2 seasons particularly, he's not only been very reliable, but he's been incredibly durable. And I'm sure he's going to want to be compensated for that. So for the Giants' sake, I hope that's a guy that they can work out a deal with.
Yeah, Pinnock and Manuel were together in 2021. So they had a full season together. That was Manuel's first year with the Jets, and Pinnock was a 5th-round pick that year.
Right,
but
Pitt. He was basically a special teams player.
Correct, but, they did have some exposure to
well,
one another, and he was part of the defensive meetings. Yeah,
yes.
Absolutely. So I think that familiarity helps, at least when they're evaluating the free agents to determine whether or not they want to bring him back. But I can't emphasize it enough. If you go back, you could even Google articles. The Jets front office was on the record saying they did not want to get rid of Pinnock.
No.
They had to get rid of somebody. You have to put them through waivers. You can't keep everybody, especially if it's a guy that mainly was playing special teams. They had so much youth in that secondary that they had to make the sacrifice. And the Giants, remember, were in an attractive position to claim players that season.
Very much so.
And they needed to turn around the roster. So that was really the main rationale behind why the Jets parted ways with Pinnock. It wasn't a reflection of they didn't think highly of him. In an ideal world, if they had extra space, they would have retained him, or they would have had him pass through waivers, not go claimed, and then put him back on the practice squad.
Well, the other thing is,
or
too,
something like that.
Pinnock was not like a first-round draft pick. He was a 5th-round choice.
Yeah.
So, that's another thing when teams take into account their depth and, okay, can we afford to take a chance and hopefully sneak this guy through? You got a better chance of sneaking a 5th-round guy through than you do a 2nd-round or a 1st-round guy.
Oh, 100%. And I'm sure that was their thinking and their logic.
I'm sure it was.
But the old story is, Paul, everybody's scouting everybody in the draft, right? So just when you think you're going to pull a fast one, another team says, yeah, you know what, we just missed out on him in the 5th round. Thank you very much. We'll claim this gift. So Marcon Manuel, according to reports, of course, nothing official, the new secondary coach for the Giants, as well as their passing game coordinator, replacing Jerome Henderson. So we'll open up the phone lines. We'll also get into the divisional round, the NFL playoffs, some takeaways, because there was a big theme, which goes back to the basics of NFL fundamentals in terms of what happened in the divisional
previous round, too.
Correct. So I think that relates to the Giants and everybody else surrounding the National Football League. But before we open up the phone lines here, reminder that you could check out, of course, the Giants Huddle podcast. You could subscribe to that. It features long-form interviews with Giants players, coaches, and front office staff, past and present. Plus, you can hear from the best analysts covering Big Blue and the NFL. Search for Giants Huddle. Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, or you could go to giants.com/podcast. And don't forget, if you're on Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star positive review for all of our Giants podcasts. That, of course, includes right here, Big Blue Kickoff Live, as we look to spread the wealth. Let's check in with Max in New Brunswick here on BBKL. What's happening, Max? What do you got for us?
Hi, how you doing? First of all, Lance, it's good hearing from you, and Paul, always good hearing from you guys. I like your perspectives on.
Well, thanks for your interest.
On different things.
Absolutely. So, what do you have for us? What's on your mind?
First, a long-time listener. I think last time I called was about 2 years ago, so I don't get the chance to call in often. I did want to speak about a draft prospect or just different ideas I had. I did want to get your perspective. One of them is, first round, I don't want to get a quarterback. I just don't feel that the market, the prospects for this year warrants a top pick, our top pick. I would prefer either is it Travis Hunter, the cornerback wide receiver, or Carter in the first round. Second round, maybe a quarterback if one is good enough, or offensive lineman. I will like to know which one you guys would prefer in that round, which would be the better prospect. And one guy I'm thinking about, would you be opposed to replacing a running back for more depth with someone like Manungai? I know he's has a lot of miles because he was basically Rutgers' entire offense, but he seemed like a really good prospect and possibly a replacement for Gray. Just wanted to see what you guys thought about that, and thanks for taking my call.
Okay. Well, appreciate the phone call. I don't know where you want to start on that front. There's a lot.
I've been talking about this draft now for a number of months. I think you should go because because
tennis.
everybody knows how I feel about this number 3 pick and the quarterback situation. So I have not rehearsed this with Lance. We have absolutely no idea.
We have not compared notes.
How we both feel about this. And I warn you, though, I have now sold both John and Matt into my philosophical way of dealing with the quarterback spot and the number 3 overall pick. They're pretty much on board with me outside of a few back-ended tweaks. So you could be the dissenter. You could be.
Well, once again, I don't know your perspective.
I know. So I'm anxious to hear this.
Well, I mean, my viewpoint is...
You didn't listen every day?
No, I'm sorry, Pearson. I had a lot on my plate. Yeah, I'm playing catch-up, though. You know, the archives, every day I find a little time for some crumbs before I go to sleep.
And by the way, I have Pearson on most of my side here, too. He's got a couple tweaks different, but philosophically...
Boy, you've been doing a lot of influencing.
He's even in on the way I'm thinking on this.
He's in. Okay. Well, my philosophy is, and I mean, it resembles a lot of my thinking in terms of previous conversations, Paul, that we have had. And I'll start big picture here. Number one, remember, every quarterback doesn't work out in the draft class, especially those high in the first round. I mean, we don't even have to go that far back to the archives. Look at the Zach Wilson class, right? Trevor Lawrence is the only one still breathing with his current team, and the jury is still out there. So the Giants, if the first 2 teams take quarterbacks, which I think they will because they're clearly both in need of that, and let's assume there aren't any moves, that means the Giants need to have conviction, which is the term that you and I love, in the room that whoever is 3rd on their list, whoever is 4th on their list, whatever it may be, that they can envision the environment is right for them to come in and flourish. If there's no conviction, you're force-feeding a quarterback on yourself under those circumstances, and I think that's very, very dangerous territory. Now, Bo Nix has worked out nicely thus far this season with the Broncos, okay?
And I'm not surprised.
Well, because of Sean Payton's track record and the overwhelming experience that Bo Nix had in college. See, that's the outlier here. It's not just, is there a 3rd quarterback that you love behind Sanders and Ward? It's how much time has he had on the collegiate landscape? And if you're trying to sell me, Paul, on a quarterback that's been a 1-year starter, that would make me even more worrisome. I think Travis Hunter, if you're talking about impact, bang for your buck, great value, it makes the most sense because he's the closest guarantee that you're going to find for where you're picking. But, this is where need, unfortunately, in the National Football League, and I'm trying to walk that fine line in terms of what I would think versus the pressure that the Giants front office is facing. And those things don't always align, Paul.
Not
as
always.
You well know.
Absolutely.
Travis Hunter, as it stands right now, would be the most sensible and logical pick because of value. But something tells me, because of the huge void right now under center, and depending on how free agency plays out, if they don't love a veteran or they don't want to rent a veteran, it would not surprise me if they sell themselves on number 3 or number 4 on the depth chart. That's how I would assess the situation right now.
Well, I think it's really a 2-pronged question because we kind of skipped over the first part by asking you to go right to pick number 3. I've tried to sell everybody out there that the free agent quarterback they sign in March is going to have a big impact on how they view the quarterback scenario in the draft.
Oh, sure. I agree.
So I guess my question to you, and this may be where we differ now, because I seem to have everybody else in this room on board with getting a bridge quarterback, a legitimate veteran bridge quarterback.
I think you need that whether you draft a quarterback or not.
Okay.
I would still stand behind that argument.
Good.
Yeah.
All right, so we're unanimous.
I mean, there's a huge need for that.
Okay, so now what is your checklist and what is your primary goal in signing that bridge quarterback? Give me a thought from the free agents that we know who are available right now, because there may be some guys set free, there may be some guys who are going to be traded, et cetera, et cetera. I get all of that. but of the available free agents today, who is your bridge? Why is he your top target as your bridge? And how will that affect your decision when you pick third in the draft?
Well, I mean, once again, the reason why, to me, the bridge quarterback is important is because I'm not a huge fan of throwing the rookie to the wolves, especially if your house is not completely in order, because too many quarterbacks have been negatively impacted. So I would be fine if they want to bring in a young quarterback and have a veteran here help mentor them. And then, Paul, we get 7 games into the season. They want to make the transition like what Coughlin did with Eli Manning. And that was against Unique because they were 5-4 at the time with Kurt Warner.
Yes,
okay, so I'm not making an ideal comparison, but it's not unheard of that 8 games in, you feel, okay, the rookie's learned enough. He's been a sponge. Let's get him some experience. They want to do that. That's fine. But you also need to have a quarterback that you feel can run your offense, where you are going to be respectable on offense. You're going to be able to move the ball, and you're not going to be a liability on that side of the ball. So I don't just want to bring in Joe Schmo to eat up space, is my point.
In short, he's got to be good enough to win some games.
Without a doubt. And the 2 guys that right now I think are logic, throwing money aside, that you should look at and entertain.
Well, money's got to be part of it, though.
Money certainly has to be part of it, but I think, once again, if you're going to go in the direction of a rookie quarterback, remember, the leeway in the salary cap should be there if you have to spend a little bit more on a 1-year deal. Remember, you're not locking the guy up for 10 years. Talking about a 1-year deal, Paul.
Just before
maybe an option for a second
before we
year.
Get to your pick.
Yeah.
The estimate, according to Over the Cap, is that the Giants will have a little bit more than $40 million in free agency to spend this year.
Okay, well, that's pretty good.
That's the estimate.
That's good space.
And they do need some other spots, too.
Sure.
So how much are you willing to spend on the QB in 2025? Because that really kind of needs to be determined before you know what price range you're looking at for the quarterback.
Well, I'm going to bring up a quarterback. To me, the range is like what Sam Darnold got this past season would be my range. The 1-year deal he got.
Okay, but he's going to ask for a big raise now.
He is, but I also think there may be some skepticism based on how the season ended. Not to say that nobody's going to want to spend on him. So if you want to say, okay, he gets bumped up into more in the $20 million range, that's a lot to spend on a quarterback, about
he's
half your money.
He's going to want more than that.
I think also
he's not thinking of himself as a bridge. He's thinking of himself as a starter.
Well, but the point is, he may also turn down teams because he doesn't want to be the gap guy. He may want to go to a team where they're offering him an opportunity to play for multiple years. But
he's not taking a bridge
also,
deal.
beggars can't be choosers, as they say. Well, no, I mean, once again, we don't know how the market's going to play out.
All right.
So I think that is something that I wouldn't completely eliminate. But Darnold and Kirk Cousins, because he's going to be cut by Atlanta, those are the two.
He's not as of today, but okay.
But, I mean, let's project. Those are the 2 with the most experience. You want to throw Andy Dalton in? I'll throw Andy Dalton in as well. So I'll go to 3. One of those 3, to me, can help you win games, stay functional on offense, and Darnold would be the exception of breaking open the piggy bank. I think the other 2 you can get away with, financially speaking.
They will be cheaper, and they will understand what a bridge quarterback is meant to do. Okay. I am totally on board philosophically. We are unanimous. However, my number 1 bridge quarterback is Jimmy Garoppolo.
Okay. I'm just worried about the injury history with him.
I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. Andy Dalton is another guy, though, who is on my radar.
Yeah.
So
Andy did a nice job. I mean, even when they benched Bryce Young in Carolina.
I could absolutely potentially see Andy Dalton.
Mentored Bryce Young. That's the other thing that's attractive about Andy. He's been in this circumstance before.
It's very important that the bridge understands what a bridge is meant to do.
Yep.
Because otherwise you're going to have a problem in that locker room.
See, Darnold, to your point, is in the period of his career where, he wants to make a statement and get back in the fold of being a guy that could be the man for a team as opposed to hold somebody's hand. Kirk, I think, may have seen the light this past season, and age getting up there, not as mobile, that he may have to settle for, okay, I'm going to be a bridge guy now as opposed to a guy that's going to be the quarterback for the next 3 years. And Andy has already fully accepted that. You don't have to sell Dalton on this.
No, you do not.
It's not a problem at all. So 2 of the 3, I don't think you have to go overwhelmingly out of your way to convince them.
Well, Cousins, in all likelihood, if he gets released by the Falcons, will have that offset language because he's guaranteed some money from Atlanta this year.
Correct.
So
Yep.
much like what happened in Pittsburgh with Russell Wilson, by the way.
Because of what Denver had to
Yes.
give him. Yeah.
So he can take a lot less from his new team because the Falcons are going to have to pay a lot of his freight. So that does make Cousins somewhat more attractive than otherwise. Now, Russell Wilson, by the way, if he does not come back to Pittsburgh, is another potential available guy on that shelf.
Sure. And he did, once again, speak with the Giants before he went to
He
Pittsburgh.
did.
So
I
they've
brought
already had,
his name up
correct,
before,
some
too.
preliminary conversations. And also, Brian Dable, I think, and Joe Shane have to ask themselves, remember, Cousins, no mobility. So if you've got issues with the offensive line, he's not making up for that. Okay,
No.
we saw that in Atlanta. So that may not be attractive anymore. That's why you take it, here's the pool, and now all of a sudden you look at different criteria and it completely changes. Darnold has mobility, but the money may not be where you want. I think Russ I put in Darnold territory, financially speaking,
Well,
Paul,
that's kind
based
of
on
why
what he did this season.
I kind of shied away from Wilson because I think he believes he's still a starter.
Yeah.
And consequently, not only is he probably not going to be happy being a bridge, but I think he's also going to want more money than what a bridge would want.
Well, especially since you don't have the offsetting language anymore.
Correct.
So that changes the dynamics.
Again, if circumstances are right, I would talk to him. I'd feel him out, but I don't think that's going to be a fit.
I want to throw out two more guys that are less experience-wise. Just food for thought. Justin Fields and Trey Lance. Do you say to yourself, okay, we bring in a bridge quarterback that still has the potential to turn the corner and maybe be the guy in competition with, let's say you do use the third overall pick on a QB, but it's not the number one or the number two guy, and you have a healthy competition between a young veteran and the newbie. That's another thing that I think is worth entertaining because you're bringing in somebody that is not at the tail end of their career, has been in a variety of offenses. Fields has the mobility, has not had the structure and the stability. Trey Lance, same thing. I mean, Fields is definitely somebody I would think about. And those two guys, I don't see them commanding heavy money where somebody is going to be blown away by what they've done, especially this past season, and you're going to be having overwhelming competition from a financial perspective. I would keep those two names on the back burner.
I've kind of had Fields on the periphery of my radar. Lance, no. I'm not a Trey Lance guy, was not a Trey Lance guy coming out of school, and I would not even talk to him.
Understand, well, there's injury concern with him too.
But Justin Fields, interesting. If you want to go in the direction of what you said, sign a younger guy with the thought that he has a higher ceiling.
Yeah.
If you're going to go down that road, I would not go down that road myself. But if you went down that road, he would be the top name on that list. If you're going to go there, I can't, because the way I'm looking at 2025 is that you already know that ownership has expressed a very, very small amount of patience remaining. You cannot, in my opinion, sign a young veteran who's got a very small resume and has the potential to come in here and maybe win 3 or 4 games. That's poison to me. You've got to do better than that. You've got to be more competitive than that. You've got to be able to win more games than that to at least keep the boat afloat. I need a guy who's got a much healthier resume, more experience, and more victories, and the ability to handle the big, bright spotlight. That's why Jimmy G, for me, again, I'd have to get my medical staff to check him, but he checks the most boxes for me of any of the bridge quarterbacks.
No, and I'm with you. It's just I would be very, very scared about him holding up durability-wise, Paul.
And that's a
we've
fair
been
question.
down this road, and I was a huge Jimmy G fan, but it got to the point where how many times am I going to go to bat for a guy that can't stay on the field? You're better off going with Justin
Understood.
Fields, even if he exposes himself to additional hits.
And I've had a number of football people have said to me they love my idea. A lot of the fans on this show do not. And that's fine. But
Tell
I
me
will
something
say,
I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. As much as I have him at the top of my list, my medical staff, if I'm the GM, my medical staff has got to give me the okay on him. They don't give me the okay on him, then he's off the list. It's that simple. And I think that's important for everybody out there who's been coming at me and saying, well, Jimmy G's got a lot of injury history. I get that. I'm assuming, if he's number one on my list, I'm bringing him in and I'm telling my medical guys, check on him. If you give me the thumbs up and you think he's okay, he's worth the risk, then that's where I'm going. But yeah. I appreciate the thought. You still got to vet him out.
Oh, certainly. I mean, listen, that goes for any player at any position, but specifically a guy with that level of baggage. So those are just a few ideas in terms of the direction that the quarterback can take the Giants with respect to the bridge position. Let's reopen up the phone lines as we move forward here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. We check in with Lou in Pennsylvania. Lou, welcome aboard. What do you got for us?
Hey, guys. Hey, John. Hey,
it's Lance, but it's okay. I've been called worse. No worries. Yes.
Hi.
Yeah, so, hey, guys, could you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you loud and clear.
All right. Yeah,
when you operate correctly with our names, but it's okay.
Locations. With the QB, I know you guys said Jimmy G. I'm scared because he's not mobile. He doesn't do too well with RPOs. Injury history, I'll say nobody mentioned his name, Trubisky. I don't know if they crossed lines when he was in Buffalo, when he got traded or released from the Bears.
His name has come up on prior shows.
He has experience.
Yeah. Yeah, his name has come up on prior shows. Yes, go ahead.
He can move. I think he took a team to the playoff. I know they didn't go far,
he took
but
the Bears
he has
in 2018.
So I think Bridge will be a good thing with Trubisky and even Andy Dalton. My thing with the coaching or what the GM did.
Say that again?
He had a QB on the roster, Daniel Jones. I don't think he played horrible. I think there were more drop passes, and if we call more passes, we will talk about him a little differently. But what dead cap space do we lose by letting him go? Also, the next point is just the O-line. If we draft an O-line, we can draft somebody that played predominantly like left tackle or right tackle and switch them. I think we need to draft an O-line and have him play that spot he's been playing his entire collegiate career. And it's just the dead space or whatever dead cap we have from letting Daniel Jones go. And even just not even putting a franchise on Saquon to trade him out of the division where we could get back something on the back end in conversation. Because now do we get anything if somebody else signed Daniel Jones? I don't think so.
No.
And Saquon, it hurts being in PA having to deal with this.
All right, Lou. Well, listen, I think a lot of people can relate to that from that perspective. Appreciate the phone call. $22 million is the dead cap hit, just to answer his first question. But once again, you threw out earlier, based on projections, still in that $40 million ballpark, which is still a healthy position to be in, despite the dead cap hit. And they knew that going in before they made that decision.
Yes.
In terms of saving approximately $19 million under those circumstances as well. But $22 million, to answer your question, is the first part of the equation.
The caller was interested in running RPOs. If that's a top priority for you, then Marcus Mariota is a guy you have to consider because of his mobility.
Sure. I mean, you could do that with Justin Fields as well.
Yes, you could.
So that's why
But I mean, Mariota's another name.
No, well, he's more of a veteran guy.
Right.
Yeah.
That comes out of the mobility box, so to speak.
Absolutely, if that's something that they're looking for. But the more and more I'm thinking about it, Paul, and I understand that everybody may not be on board. I think back to, if you remember when Pat Shurmur was the head coach of the Giants, one of the things that he liked, his philosophy was have as many quarterbacks as possible in-house to foster competition.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean bring everybody off the street, but meaning if you have two young guys, fine. Let the two young guys push each other. So I'm saying to myself, you draft a quarterback at 3, you have Fields, who's hungry to reclaim a starting job. I mean, think about it. This is a guy that started off very well with the Steelers this past season. Russ was dealing with a calf injury. Tomlin goes in the direction of Russ. Fields is now sitting on the sideline, being a spectator. And, hey, it worked out. The Steelers once again made the playoffs. But I'm sure, you ask Fields, he's got to be itching to get back out there. Is he not?
Without a doubt.
So that mindset is somewhat attractive, and he gives you the mobility, and he gives you a legitimate investment that could actually pan out. That's why I think that has more attraction than renting an aging veteran for just 1 year, which, let's face it, they already did that this past season.
I'm just not sure that a younger guy with a lesser resume is going to guarantee me a competitive nature during the course of the season.
Oh, you're talking about the wins, and
I need
get
to
that,
know after what's going on here. I need to know this team can be more competitive and get more wins. I don't think rolling the dice on a younger guy like that who has a very small pro resume really whets my appetite very much. But again, if you wanted to go down that road, he's the best name. Now, is he sour on Pittsburgh? What if Russell Wilson walks?
it's possible that
Does Fields stay?
No, that's a very fair question.
So maybe he's not available.
Sure, and I'm sure if you're Justin Fields, if Pittsburgh's offering you the starting job versus you come
I think
to a
he'll
new
stay.
team. Yeah. No, that's something else. That's why this is a very, very preliminary conversation, because
No doubt.
we're making assumptions of guys that are going to be out on the market when they could very well be locked up with respect to the early stages of March. Let's head back to the lines. We got Jamal in Big D. Jamal, welcome aboard. What do you got for us?
What's going on, fellas? Thank y'all for having me.
Hi.
So I came with a whole nother thought process and conversation, but I like the conversation y'all are having. So I want to add to that. To your point about Justin Fields, right? So say if Justin Fields was available, and to your point, he is young, but at the same time he's hungry. I wouldn't necessarily. I mean, between Russ, Fields, I would at this point. We'll take anybody. We're desperate. But to what you're saying, you say it's preliminary. But if I'm Joe Shane, you have to look at it this way. You have to look who's going to be where. You have to have a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 group, because you don't know what's going to happen. And I hate to say this, the way we botched the Daniel Jones situation, not having a quarterback behind him prior to, I feel like there is no slippery slope for error. So what I would recommend, I know you threw out some names. I like the Mariota only because he's a division guy. I'm a real big believer. You want to get guys who are familiar with the division. So I think he would be decent in that as a bridge quarterback. I know you said Trey Lance. I'm even open to Cooper Kupp. Just somebody as a bridge. He knows, not Cooper Kupp, Cooper Rush.
Cooper Rush.
I was going to say, wait a minute now.
Cooper Kupp has thrown a few passes in his NFL career, and does have
you want to add a receiver too? That would be okay.
No, but you know what? Cooper Rush is a really good one, though, as well, Jamal.
I don't need receivers throwing the receivers. No, but Cooper Rush, I know he's not the RPO type of guy, but he knows, once again, another guy who knows the division. He seems to manage well with games. When he's with Dallas, he doesn't seem to lose a lot of games. You know what I mean? He kind of keeps them in the float of games. And then my last name I'm real big on as a bridge quarterback is one of our former players as a backup, Derek Carr, David Carr's brother. I know he's coming off an injury, but I wouldn't mind. He's a gunslinger when he's healthy. I know he makes costly mistakes sometimes, but I think he would be someone that can move into that, bridge quarterback type idea because he's getting older. You have injury history. I would take Derek Carr over Jimmy Garoppolo.
I'm a big Carr guy. You know that if you've listened to this show for years. I love Derek Carr. I thought the Jets should have gone after him instead of Aaron Rodgers. I made that very clear. But here's the problem with Carr right now. Number one, you don't know for sure if the Saints are going to move on. Number two, what kind of financial obligations are you going to be talking about?
Right.
Bringing in a Derek Carr, I don't think he thinks he's a bridge, nor should he. He thinks he's a starter, and he's going to want that kind of money.
But his injury history moves towards that kind of what you were talking about before with some of these other players like a Jimmy G and things of that nature. And then moving to the draft, I wouldn't even – if we can't get Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders at 3, we don't even look at a quarterback at 3. We just get the best valuable player, whether it's Hunter, the DN from Penn State, a beast O-lineman, a position of need at that. I know we don't like looking at position of need, but we got so many holes we need to. But I wouldn't get a quarterback at 3. I wouldn't even reach for one at 3 if it's not. In my eyes, if it's not Cam Ward, then we don't get him. So even though I like Shedeur, I would love to have Shedeur in the building, but I'm a Deion guy. But at the end of the day, if it ain't Cam Ward or Shedeur, I think we need to move on, get the best available player, fits our need at 3,
Sure.
and then get a Milrow, or Dart, the kid for Ole Miss, or Howard, either second or third round. And that's my idea of a quarterback of what we can do, because I do believe Milrow is more of a project quarterback, but I definitely think within our division he can do some things with the way he runs the ball and things of that nature.
Well, I mean, listen, you got to be able to run regardless of what division you're in. And Jamal, we'll let you go on that point to appreciate the phone call. I wouldn't necessarily focus solely on the NFC East. I mean, really in this day and age, you need a quarterback that can move. I mean, when you look at some of these QBs, the sacks they've taken, I mean, look at what the Chiefs did to C.J. Stroud. And Stroud's not a statue even. And he was taken down more often than not by Spags.
More and more people who you listen to now who have been kind of handicapping the draft for a whole year are seemingly talking about Milrow as a late first-rounder now.
Yeah.
It seems as though if you want to get him, you're going to have to move up into the back end of the first round. I don't think he's getting to round 2.
I'd be surprised as well. And the other thing, once again, whether you agree with the philosophy or not, is the fact that there are a lot of teams of the mindset you don't know if you're going to be picking this high again. Okay? And when you get to the top 3, sometimes you say to yourself, okay, if we don't take a quarterback at 3 and we bring in one of these options we're talking about, Paul, you still need to solve the quarterback position, okay? That void still exists no matter what you want to do. And I understand there may be options in later rounds, but history has proven that when you get in this position, most teams don't take it for granted and usually take a quarterback. I'm just going based on the trends and the thought process around NFL front offices.
And based on that human element that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Maybe the Giants are actually better off in the position that they're in because they have had so many rough seasons lately. And the owner has said, basically, I'm practically out of patience. So maybe in that regard, maybe they're a little bit more fortunate because now it's kind of been cleared up for them that, okay, 2025 has to be a significantly better season than what happened in 2024. There isn't just, okay, try to doggy paddle, try to run over the hot coals and get to 26. No, there's a pretty strong mandate by an owner who says he doesn't have much patience left, and if he doesn't feel a lot better about this team this time next year, he won't have any patience. That kind of clears it up a little bit.
No, it certainly does. I guess the other thing, though, and I'm thinking about is most general managers, Paul, are of the mindset they want a shot of bringing in their own guy, right? So Shane is in a position now where he has a top 3 pick. He did not have that luxury. You know, now it was his decision to retain Daniel Jones. Okay, they had the flexibility, but what I'm saying is that most general managers, when they're in this position, they say, all right, I'm going to now hand the keys to the kingdom to the guy that I've scouted, I see fit,
right?
Because there's no guarantee that I'm going to have the luxury and the opportunity to do this all over again.
If you're the GM,
yeah,
and that is of the ultimate importance to you,
okay,
and you don't feel that strongly about this class, or let's say the number 3 quarterback on your board, then you better make sure you signed a bridge quarterback who's going to win games because he's going to buy you that extra year of time to get the guy that you may love in 26.
Yeah, well, and that's why I keep going back to it's not one or the other. It's both. Both simultaneously. The bridge quarterback and if you take a quarterback at 3 are of utmost importance. You don't weigh one more than the other. They both have to be at a point where there's conviction and confidence.
I keep telling people the bridge is monumentally important. There are so many folks who don't seem to think that. It is. I think it's even more important, to be frank with you. But be that as it may, we know this Giants team has to be more competitive and win more games in 2025. We know that for sure. And you better figure out a plan while you're doing all of this stuff as to which quarterback's going to give you a chance to win more games.
Now, on a somewhat related note, as we're talking about some of the quarterbacks that thrived and were able to help their teams win games and make the playoffs, I know we were teasing it, so I want to get it in before maybe we squeeze another caller in. The biggest takeaway from the divisional round is turnover differential. Was it not, Paul?
Ridiculous.
Plus 10 for the 4 teams that won. Now, in fairness, Texans, Chiefs had no turnovers. But still, Kansas City protected the football. And as a result, they wound up winning the football game, and the Lions coughed it up 5 times, and we saw the Rams twice, and what happened with the Ravens 3 times. That is no coincidence at all.
There are 3 core things that continue to raise their heads throughout the postseason. Turnover differential, play along the line of scrimmage, dominate the trenches, and you're going to win the game in all likelihood. And then number 3, just simply make the routine plays, okay? You can't have Mark Andrews getting the ball punched out or dropping a ball at the goal line. You can't have, Jackson throwing up a ridiculous interception where, come on. He had no business throwing that ball. Yeah. And then on another time when he was trying to scramble around in the pocket after a rough snap, he just drops the ball. I mean, you can't have that. You got to make all the routine plays. You got to win the turnover battle, and you have to win the line of scrimmage. You do those 3 things, my goodness, your calculations of winning a ball game are off the charts.
I'll throw in the other thing, which to me is the icing on the cake, is explosive plays. I mean, the Eagles had a lot of explosive plays. And even the Commanders, too. And they had a pick 6.
They always help.
So that's the other thing. And while it's not the perfect example because the Giants had struggled the year prior, but just to give you an idea where they were able to maybe cover up some of their issues a year ago, the Giants went from, and what do I say all the time? Just because you do well in opportunistic plays one year doesn't mean all of a sudden you're going to now flip it over.
You're talking about 22 when they had a tremendous amount of takeaways.
Well, no, I'm even talking about 23 and 24. The Giants in 23 had a very good
turnover
differential.
Well, they were plus 14. Plus 12. Plus 12,
They went to minus 8.
Yeah.
Paul, that's 20 spots in one season.
And they didn't even win with that plus 12 the year before.
Correct. And that's another reason why I'm going to further emphasize your point that you got to take care of the routine.
Yep.
A lot of the teams that actually did not do a good job protecting the football had done it over the course of the season. Case in point, the Vikings were plus 12 in turnover differential this season. They didn't look like that team when they played the Rams, did they?
No.
Because why? The caliber of competition is different when you get to the playoffs.
Sure is.
So numbers are padded a bit depending on who you play during the course of the 17-game slate.
Well, and this is one of the reasons why when evaluators go through these things, they've got to decide, hey, is that guy a terrific regular season quarterback? Or when he gets to the playoffs, what's he going to be? I mean,
does he have the it factor?
We've had a bunch of guys who are phenomenal in terms of the regular season. Lamar Jackson, Tony Romo, Phillip Rivers, Kirk Cousins have had some of the great regular seasons in the last 20 years. At quarterback, put up incredible numbers. But every time those guys got to the playoffs, all of a sudden they turned into Clark Kent. Now, did their teams do other things? Did their teams do other things that also fell and dropped off the table and were not playoff caliber things? Absolutely, that's true. But each one of those guys did not play at their best in the postseason. They clearly had a drop-off in their play. And when their team needed them the most to maybe bring them out of the quicksand, those guys failed.
All right, let's head back to the phone lines before we wrap up shop here. Steve is in D.C. joining us. What's happening, Steve? What do you got for us?
Well, first of all, Happy New Year, gentlemen. And Lance, it's great to hear you on the show. I know it's been a while, so I hope all's well with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Listen, I'm going to say a lot, so hopefully, Paul, you won't interrupt me. Because y'all did a lot of talking. I just want to say this because I'm going to address something. First of all, I just want to say this. I don't know why it's all about Lamar, not playing good when clearly, if you want to point to anything, I think Mark Andrews pretty much blew the game. Did Lamar drop the ball in bad weather, this, that, and the other? But for you to sit here and put that on him after the year he had and even how well he played, that's crazy to me.
Oh, no.
Anyway,
I said Mark Andrews. Hold on, Steve. No, but you're making a statement based on an inaccuracy. I said Mark Andrews first and Lamar also. Both of those guys made critical mistakes that were routine plays. You can't make those mistakes.
Listen, Paul, let me just get my little thing out, and I'm going to let you
go ahead.
Wherever you want to do it.
That's all right. Go ahead.
But I just want to, yesterday's show, it was all, about 2026. Paul, we tried to move up last year and couldn't move up. We might not even be, and we should be trying to move up this year. And now you want to try to kick the can down the road because you don't like the top 2 quarterbacks? Listen, we don't have that luxury. It's time for us to take a swing. I told you last year when you were talking about, Michael Penix is not good enough. He's going to go in the second or third round. This or the other. I like Atlanta's medical team a lot better than ours. Okay, Joe Shane, Brian Daboll. Forget losing free agents. The fact that we got nothing for them, that's incompetence to criminal. I'm going to say this. I personally have no problem telling you the assignment is the same. We sat there and won a meaningless game against the Colts, and then trying our depth against the third string, this, that, and the other. We all knew we needed a quarterback, so the assignment is the same. If you can't move up and get your guy, then you need to move back a couple spots and grab the next guy you can get. That's the assignment. It's one pick. My guy, I personally would like to have Ward, but if we can't do that, I'm okay with moving back a couple spots, still grabbing a blue chip player, and then coming up and grabbing a Milroe or a Dart or whoever they like. But it's not, we're going to just wait to 2026. And I heard you bring up Mr. Manning's nephew, man. Stop that. Now we're going to wait on him? This is absolutely ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Steve, I think that the only thing I want to add to what you're saying is that I don't think you're fully listening to the context of everything that's being said, because what John and I and Matt have all said is that you got to get the bridge quarterback, and then you take a prospect or a project in this draft. Now, John is a little more agreeable. John's more agreeable to taking a first rounder. Matt and I would rather take him in the second or third round.
But the thing is this. You said other players were going to be in second, third round. Lance is just trying to tell you, first of all, we can't talk about 2026. So you got to get the quarterbacks where they're at. That's the assignment.
Not if you don't believe in them.
To be the smartest guy
Steve,
in the room.
if you don't believe in them.
Paul. If that's the third best quarterback,
well, I think, Paul, he's operating that you believe in him. I think
that's an assumption.
That's what he's
that's an
operating.
assumption.
I'm saying move back a couple spots, grab a blue chip, but you got to move back up, and you got to grab Milroe or Dart.
Well,
that's the assignment.
Steve, listen.
And it's their job to get it done.
We'll let you go on that note. Appreciate the phone call. What I would counter with what Steve just said is, if you love the quarterback, I mean, why move down 4 or 5 spots? Just take the quarterback. I mean, why are you chancing it for an extra pick here or there? I mean, to me, if you get to 3 and you have a quarterback in mind, I would not get caught up in, move 3, 4 spots back so you get a pick. Take the quarterback, and then don't chance, God forbid, somebody else swoops up and moves up and takes the guy you want, and then what are you going to do under those circumstances?
You may agree with this premise. I don't know, but, I look at these things a lot differently than a lot of other people do. Steve, to you and every other fan out there, let me make it very clear for the 100 billionth time. When I tell you what I would do, I'm not predicting what the Giants will do, okay? I'm simply saying if I were in their shoes, here's how I would do it. It's based on my frame of reference and my checklist and my priorities. I don't think on my checklist that either one of those 2 quarterbacks is worth taking at number 3. I've already outlined my plan. Now, you want to tell me you want to move up into the bottom of the first round to get a Milroe, or you want to make sure you get Dart in the second round? I'm okay with that. I've said all along, you can take a rookie quarterback in this draft. I just wouldn't take him at 3. Now, the final point is this. If the Giants front office believes at number 3, whichever quarterback is on the board is their answer, they have to take him. They have a responsibility to take the guy who they are all in on. I'm not telling you what they're thinking because I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and be dumb enough to predict what they're going to do because I don't know. What I'm telling you, Steve, is how I personally feel. If the Giants believe that at number 3, they're all in on a quarterback, if his name is Jeffrey Simmons or Bart Jones or Jiminy
Simmons?
If his name is Pinocchio or Jiminy Cricket, then you take him.
That's some versatility. Yeah.
Bugs Bunny.
Wow. We're throwing
Elmer
Warner
Fudd.
Brothers. Yeah.
Daffy Duck. If they're all in on that guy, then they have to take him. They have to.
Yeah.
But that's their decision, not mine.
Mickey Mouse too? Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Right? Okay. Just want to make
if
sure.
they think he's the guy, they have to take him. They have the responsibility of a franchise in their hands. It doesn't matter what Lance thinks or what I think or what you think, Steve. they got to take the guy they're all in on. So let me please make it clear to everybody out there who wants to come at me for my quarterback plan. It's my plan if it was my team. I'm not telling you that plan should be forced on the Giants. I'm not.
No, and that's why it goes back to the conversation we had earlier. You could have the island of the draft process and the island of the bridge quarterback, but then what are the other forces outside of just analyzing those quarterbacks that come into play? And I would once again just echo the sentiments of the pressure that maybe individuals are feeling, the need to find the young guy, and more often than not, we've seen based on history, once again, that does give the level of urgency for a team to not pass up using the 3rd overall pick on a quarterback. And you at least need to digest that and understand that philosophy could very well exist even within this front office. With that being said, I think that's a good point to leave the conversation. We appreciate everybody for tuning in. Good to reconnect with you, Paul, as well as some of the callers.
Good to see you, Lance.
Absolutely. Pleasure being here. Pearson, thanks for all your help and assistance as always. We want to remind you that you've been listening to today's episode of Big Blue Kickoff Live. It's part of the Giants platforms everywhere and Giants.com/podcast. For Paul Dottino, I'm Lance Medow. Thanks so much for tuning in to Wednesday's edition of BBKA. We'll speak to you on Thursday. Have a good one.